Everyone, this is Kushal, and in this video, I'll be talking about the basics of recursion, and this is my first video. So let's start with what is recursion. So let me make a function. So this is a function, and recursion is basically a function calling itself. So so here I have defined a function, and if I call this function again inside itself, then this is called recursion. So this is basically a recursion. So where when I call this function, this function again calls itself, and it is called recursion. Now, why do we need recursion? So we need recursion because when sometimes if we have a task and which can be defined in terms of a similar subtask. So in that case, it is useful to use recursion. So when we have a task to perform that can be defined in terms of similar subtask, then in that case we require recursion to solve that task. Now, when we call a function to perform a task and that function calls itself to perform a subtask, that step is called recursive step. And there might be a point where uh, we have reached at a point where we have the subtask, and that subtask can be solved, that can be performed without calling the function again. In that case, we perform that subtask and returns its value. When we reach at a point where we have subtask and that doesn't require any more function call to solve that subtask, that case is called base case. So when we have a subtask, we and it doesn't so and it to solve that subtask, we don't require to call the function again, and it is called base case. So here, so in that base case, we return the so we perform the task here, subtask here, and uh, so perform the subtask and returns the value of base case. Returns value of the base case. Let's see with an example. Let's take an example of factorial. Suppose you want to find factorial of 5. Now to find factorial of 5, this is our task. Our task is to calculate the factorial of 5. Now to perform this task, we need 5 times factorial of 4. So to perform the task of finding the value of factorial of 5, we need factorial of 4. Now to calculate the factorial of 4, we need to solve the subtask, which is the finding the value of factorial of 3. Now to find the value of factorial of 3, we again to perform this subtask, we again have to perform another subtask, which is the finding the value of factorial of 2. To calculate factorial of 2, we need factorial of 1. Now, to perform the task of finding the value of factorial of 1, we don't require any we don't have any subtask for this one. So, and we all know that factorial of 1 is 1. So, so when we want to find the value of factorial of 2, which is basically 2 times the factorial of 1, and to calculate factorial of 1, so we don't require to call a function again because we don't have a subtask smaller than this. That, so this is basically our base case where to perform a particular subtask, we don't require to call the function again. We just simply solve that subtask and returns its value. So suppose that we have, uh, so I'm making a function called factorial, so which will return the factorial of a number, and I will be taking a number of which we have to find the factorial. Now let's suppose if this number is equals to 1. Now if the number is equals to 1, that means we all know what is the factorial of 1 is basically 1. So we will just simply return the value of factorial of 1. Now when I call this function, now this when I call this function will return me the value of factorial of 1. So when this number is 1, so it will check for this condition where if this number equals to 1, then it will return 1 to the 1. Now if I want to find the uh, value of factorial of 2, to calculate factorial of 2, here this condition will check if the given number is equals to 1 or not. So here as we can see that number is not equals to 1. That means the else condition will run, and in this condition, as we have seen that here that 2, for finding the value of factorial of 2, we require factorial of 1. So we will calculate the factorial of 1, then we will multiply with the 2, and the factorial of this will give us factorial of 2. Now this thing factorial of 1 will return us the factorial of 1. So from this statement this will return us the factorial of 1, and factorial of 1 multiplied 2 will give us value of factorial of 2, and we want factorial of 2. So in order to get this one here, we have to return the value of factorial of 2. So when I call this function, this will calculate the uh, factorial of 2 from here, and this one will calculate the factorial of 1 for us, and this will return the factorial of 1, and this whole thing will return as the factorial of 2. Now we can generalize this with saying that if we have a number, so suppose the number is 2, so we will take that number, and for finding that, let's say that number is 5. To calculate the factorial of 5, we require 5 times the factorial of the number minus 1. So here we have the factorial of 5. Factorial of 5 is basically 5 times factorial 5 minus 1. So here we will calculate the factorial of the given number minus 1. And this will, so this is generalized. So this will return as the factorial. Right. So let's let's understand this code. Let's suppose I want to find the value of let's say factorial of 4. Now to calculate the factorial of 4, I will call this function factorial. I will call this function factorial. Now this function will check the given number is not equal to 4, so this will run this condition. And this condition is basically factorial of 3 times factorial of 3 times 4. Now so this function will calculate the factorial of 3, which is basically factorial of 2 times 3. Now this function will calculate the factorial of 2, the factorial of 1 times 2. Now this function will calculate the factorial of 1, which is 1. Now this whole thing will get returned from here, and this will give us the factorial of 4. So this is the value of factorial of 4, which is 24. So this code also calculates the factorial of 0, that is when number equals to 0. So it will return 1. Now let us see another example. So now in this example, we are given an array of length 4 having elements 10, 11, 13, 15, and we have to tell whether this given array is sorted or not using recursion. Now let's see how we are going to do this. First of all, so we are given an array of length 4 and we have to check whether this given array is sorted or not. Now let us assume that the array of length 3 is already sorted. Now if we assume that, so we are assuming here that array of length 3 is already sorted. So we are assuming that this array is already sorted. Now we just have to check the last two elements. If they are in sorted order, then the whole array is in sorted order. So here the last two elements are in sorted order, and here we already assume that uh, this array is sorted of size 3, and these last two elements are also sorted. This means the whole array is sorted. Let's see this thing again. So let's suppose, so we have this array. Now what I will do to solve this, so we have to check whether this given array is sorted or not using recursion. Now first of all, I will check the last two elements. If the last two elements are in sorted order, then I will check for the rest of the array. So here the last two elements are in sorted order, so I will check for the rest of the elements. In rest of the elements also, I will check the last two elements. If they are in sorted order, here they are in sorted order, then I will check for the rest of other elements. So other remaining elements, which are 10 and 11. And here also I will check the last two elements. If last two elements are in sorted order, then I will check for the remaining element, which is 10. So I will check here for 10. Now at this point we are having only one element. Now array containing only one element is always sorted. So this condition is always true. This means this is sorted. If this is sorted and all these elements are also sorted, then array, we can say that array the given array of length 4 is sorted. Now let us see this thing step by step. So for that, I will create a function called sorted, which will take our array A and the size of the array. Now in this function, I will first of all check the last two elements. If the last two elements are sorted, so I will check the last two element, which is the element which is at the position 4 should be greater than element which is at position 3. Now if this condition is true, then I will check for the rest of the array. I will again call this function and I'm going to check the rest of the array, because this part is already sorted. So now I will check for the rest of the array. For that I will call this function again. Checking of the rest of the array is basically our subtask. So our task is to check the array of size 4, given array of size 4 is sorted or not. and our subtask is to check the array of size 3 if it is sorted or not. So I will call the is sorted for the array of length 3, and in this function also I will, so the function is same. So we will check the last two elements should be greater than, should be, so our last two elements should be in sorted order. So here last two elements are in sorted order. So if this is true, so then we are going to check for the rest of the element. We are going to check this thing for the rest of the element, that is for the array of length 2. In the array of length 2 also I will check the last two elements if they are in sorted order or not. So here we can see that 11 is greater than 10, so it is sorted order, in sorted order. And I will again check for the rest of the elements. Now I will check when the array will contain only one element, when the size of the array is only one. In that case, we have this, so which is equals to 10. Now at this point, we have array of size 1. So array containing only one element is always sorted. So this thing will return true. Now if this function is also get returned, this function is also get returned from here. So this function is returning true. So this function will return this function. This function will return this function. Now this function is returning true, so this function also return true. Similarly, this function is returning this function which is true, so this will also return true. This function is returning this function which is true. This function will also return true. So, uh, so this function will also return true. Now, and which tells us that the given array is sorted. And this when the array will contain only one element, then that case is called base case. So because we are not go for calling the function again here, we are not calling the function uh, when we have the size of the array equals to 1, we are not again going we are not calling the function is sorted again. So this means the this case is base case. Now let us see with another example. Now let's take the second element equals to 8. And again I am going to call this function is sorted of length 4. And I will take the last two elements, and you can see that last two elements are sorted. So we will again call this function for the rest of the element. I will check again a of 3. I will again check for the rest of the elements. Now at this point, the element which is at position 2 is not greater than the element which is at position 1. This thing is false. Now when this thing is false, this function, so this thing is false, so we will return false from here. We will return false from here. So this function was calling this function which is a2, and this a3 was calling a2. Now a2 is so here the condition is failed. So a2 this is sorted, e comma 2 will give us false. So this function will return false. Now also this function will also return false, and similarly this function will also return false. So at the end we we will get the output as false. So here I have taken a array of size 4, and let me make a function sorted of a boolean return type is sorted, which will take an array, and this is the size of the array. Now, if this n equals to 1, that the array is only containing one element. So in that case, I will return true. So we will return true. In that case, we will return true. Now, if the size of the array is not equals to 1, then we will check the last two elements. So if last element is greater than second last element, if this thing is true, then we will check. We will call this function again to check the rest of the elements. If the rest of, to check rest of the elements are in sorted order or not. Fine. Now this is sorted will also return in boolean. So and that thing also we have to return from here. So we will write return here. Else, now if the last two elements are not in sorted order, then we will return false from here. Okay. Now when we call this function, it will show us the given array is sorted or not. So it is printing here. So